بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters, and welcome back to Islamic Oasis Live. Alhamdulillah, today we are very honored to have our dear brother Khalil Rasheed, professor in political science at Dominican University, share his story about his journey to the truth, his story of accepting Islam, as well as his thoughts and his experiences after becoming a Muslim, researching more about the deen and the state of da'wah to non-Muslims and to new Muslims in general. Unfortunately, when we were recording, my mic ended up not working. So, khair. We managed to recover the recording still. We've chopped it up and I've put my voiceover for the questions in there. So please enjoy. Inshallah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa min walah. Barakallah fiqh. I appreciate the invite again to discuss and talk about, my journey to truth. I read the flyer, mashallah, and alhamdulillah, it was such a beautiful title. And I thought about, the journey to truth, how we're all individually on our specific journey. And, I used to talk about a lot, why I converted to Islam on different platforms, and used to discuss, in dawah activities with non-Muslims, obviously, about accepting Islam and some of the things that's really required as a human being, and that used to be in heavy rotation, if you will. But now, like you said, subhanAllah, with the last year or so, all of the global events going on with the situation in Gaza and people, elevating their interest in Islam and the Muslim world. And we've seen these waves before. We've seen these waves doing after 9/11. We've seen these waves during the Iraq War and things of that nature, the interaction, with Muslims and the religion of Islam, Middle Eastern affairs, global, affairs, things of that nature. There's a peculiar interest in it. However, this feels different the past year. So at least in the circle that I operate in, I know we all operate in different circles. But I get a lot of individuals from different communities interested in the religion of Islam. Non-Muslims on campus and interfaith things. People come together for this issue in Gaza, and people are interested in the religion of Islam. And a lot of people are accepting Islam through these different avenues. So, me specifically, thinking back on it, I was 13 years old at a very peculiar time in my life, with family things going on and a lot of things going on around me, and I was searching for a truth. That's why I love the title that you that you put up. So the truth is very important. But I actually started reading and researching a little bit earlier than that, at about 11 years old.
What is your background growing up, religiously, culturally?
So, my family was Christian. My family was Christian, typical black, African American, if you will, going through these terms and these connotations, but black family, mom's side was actually Catholic and father's side was Baptist. And I grew up, you know, um, not too attached to religion. I mean, I knew of it. There were certain practices, obviously, certain holidays, things of that nature. But I remember being about 10 years old or so, and I refused to go to a church one Easter because I'd rather do other things. And that kind of, set off a little, a little spark in me in the questioning of, what it is that I'm really doing spiritually. You know, I mean, black folks are some of the most spiritual people on the face of the earth, given their history and their background. But the fulfillment wasn't there. And I remember I was, going to one church in my neighborhood, and it was south side of Chicago, pretty, rough area, the low end, if people know their neighborhood. And I would see, some of the neighborhood activities happening. I would, observe that, and then on Sunday, the same people that was doing all these neighborhood activities, quote unquote, were in church acting like, it was all good. And I said, there's an issue with this. So I was about, 10, 11 years old when I really started to question, the direction of the spirit. You see what I'm saying? And it opened up a little curiosity into other ways of life.
What was it that got you interested in Islam?
Um, well, I can't, exclude the influence of the Nation of Islam, especially on the south side of Chicago. So, I I I basically knew that there was things besides Christianity in terms of spiritual fulfillment and the religious system and structure. And got to you know kind of sparked and piqued my interest right around the time the movie Malcolm X was popular. So I was in sixth grade, and I remember being in sixth grade, and the school that I was in, didn't have a lot of resources, so we had to share books with the students. So the students would all, we would sit in groups of fours. My sixth grade class, I remember, because I got in trouble for not completing an assignment. Each group was given two books, and we had to share. So we would complete the assignment, whether it was homework or classwork, and you had to give it to the next student at your group desk. And I remember my mom being upset, like, what kind of school is this? Because I missed an assignment, and it was on Malcolm X, the autobiography of Malcolm X, and my mom had to come up to the school to talk to the teacher. And I remember her arguing with the teacher about how the school doesn't have enough books for everybody. And I wound up taking the book and keeping it for longer than what I was supposed to or whatever. And the other student, had some issues, but it kind of sparked my interest. I didn't finish it at that time, but I got probably about a quarter into it, maybe a third into it, and I knew that there was something bubbling there. So that's what really piqued my interest. The movie was real popular at the time in the movie theater, and then I think a little bit later I saw the movie, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna finish the book actually. Um, but that was a little bit later, and you know I kind of like gravitated towards Islam through those means initially.
What about Malcolm X's story got your attention?
Yeah, well, actually, so after reading it and after watching the movie and completing the book, I still had some questions, and I knew that obviously there's Islam and there's Kufr, right? So uh, you're still trying to figure out, you know, the path that you're trying to take, because you know the Nation of Islam was ultimately responsible for his demise, right? But if you understand and analyze the change that he was going through, you understood that, okay, Islam is this thing that that has that spiritual fulfillment where you're convinced, and you have this idea, and even in the face of death, he tried to fulfill a certain mission, if you will, right? What really actually took my interest overboard was shortly after that time, my parents were going through a little split, and my mom moved to the north side of Chicago. On the north side of Chicago, I moved into a building that was full of diverse, if you will. It was a very diverse. We were actually the only American family in the building, probably, but and the majority of the people were Muslims, different countries, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, and in the life of Malcolm X and the history of the Nation of Islam, even I understood at the time that it was a very nationalistic approach to our problems in terms of the the quality and the status of the black man in America. So I always understood that was a little bit short sighted. And obviously, when he experienced his Hajj, he saw a totally different, reality of what humanity, could really represent under Islam. And so, but I didn't, I still had Nation of Islam brothers that I knew around me, and it was all black nationalism, which hey, if it fulfills you, it fulfills you. But I knew that it was a little bit short sighted. So, but what really opened my eyes was the different. Like, I saw the tangible reality of a lot of them were refugees too from different countries: Somalia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Sudan, Ethiopia. Northern Africa, a couple of Bosnian families. With the whole crisis in the '90s with Bosnia, right? They're all Muslims, and so a lot of my friends in my age group at the time, I remember, us being out in our courtyard playing basketball or whatever. But it would be discussing Islam, but not only discussing Islam, but discussing the differences, and there was some very, very intrinsic differences that I was able to pick up on. I knew the difference between Sunni and Shia from the back. Knew what an Ismaili was, knew what an Ahmadi was, knew what a Sufi was, knew all these different, different backgrounds and experiences. I don't want to put it as, sex and things, and I don't want to divide the Muslims like that. But, we all come from, it was like maybe 3 or 4 different families from Pakistan. And they were all different. You see what I'm saying? And this is one country, and they would argue over Eid, and they would argue over, things like, certain issues. And I'm like, okay, so alhamdulillah, I was able to experience a very diverse and rich culture, but also importantly, I was able to distinguish culture and religion at the same time. You see what I'm saying? So that was probably the most fulfilling aspect of my transition from the South Side to the North Side, and really understanding what Islam was about.
What are your thoughts on the Islamic worldview as compared to the nationalistic one?
Supposed to be what it's supposed to be, but we understand the reality, and even with the amount of resources, tangible resources, and obviously the most valuable resource is human resource. Even with that, the we know that the thing that you're talking about is what really drives a lot of movement. I won't say specifically, the kind of movements or the kind of, but when we think about Islam, and I remember having this discussion a while ago with Christian missionary from the Middle East, and they were talking about how Islam is such a deeds-based religion, and like you said, with your understanding that it's Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and the message at the center for the Muslims is what it's supposed to be. But a lot of our actions, a lot of our deeds is based off of grabbing that tangible thing, whether it fulfills you spiritually or not. And so, unfortunately, we love to brag Islam is the fastest growing religion. Islam, we have so many numbers, but what's driving our action is really a lot of materialistic motivations, I would say.
What are your thoughts on the state of the Ummah now between rise and fall?
As a ummah and as humanity itself, I believe the cycles and the ups and downs is intrinsic in our development. I think, and you're studying history, so you probably see those patterns. But like I said before the recording, the tools that we use to extract the quote unquote truth of history or sociology, political science, Sharia, whatever, you whatever field you want to you know get into, and understanding human development, the nature of insan, and the human being. Um, yeah, it's all about those tools. that drive us. And I mean, going back to the original point, that unfortunately for us, I think it's getting better. It was worse. I think some time ago. I think we're getting to the point now with global affairs that Muslims are starting to realize that we gonna need each other regardless of where we come from, and we're starting to shed a lot of those barriers that we had around us. And you're a student of history, so you understand that you know probably post World War II, if you will. These ideas of nationalism were pretty much uh, developed and formulated as a way to control the world. It's intrinsically um, not natural to our psyche in terms of these borders. And we're starting to realize that a lot of it is superficial. To by a hegemony to keep control over larger society. So
At what point did you realize that you wanted to be Muslim?
so it's actually interesting because about 11, after finishing Malcolm X, I started to call myself a Muslim, and started to adopt some of the morals, if you will, some of the habits. I told my mother I wasn't eating pork no more, and um, just started identifying myself as a Muslim, which is interesting.
How'd your family take it?
And they thought it was a phase.
Yeah.
My family, it was like, oh, it's a phase. You'll get over it. But for the most part, I kind of kept it to myself. When certain things would come up, mainly the food issue. I'm not, my diet. I don't eat pork, and I started, trying to get as much information as I could. Seeking out books and things of that nature. So this is like 11, 12, but I'm still uh, still in a rough environment, where, I gotta protect myself and protect those around me, which is interesting because, coming from the south side of Chicago, you know, and originally born on the west side, it was funny, in the projects. I don't, what the projects are, right?
Yeah.
So when I was little, when I was smaller, growing up before I moved north, we had this thing where you protect your building. We used to have this saying like our apartment was our city, our building was our state, our block was our country, the neighborhood was the world. So it was a very small and minute way of thinking, but so the projects, but we did that. We organized ourselves based off of that. So if we lived in a certain building, we played basketball with teams from that building. If we play in another building in the courtyard, we would group up as different buildings, right?
Mm.
So when I moved to the north side, I still had the same mentality, and all
It's a
my
different planet now.
yeah. But I had the same mentality when it came to my friends. So if you lived in my building, then we kind of like protected each other in the streets. And so a lot of my friends, immigrants, they don't know how this country works. They just came here 2 weeks ago. They have to fight the neighborhood gangbangers, and they have to deal with neighborhood stuff. So I would pretty much coach them up on how to handle certain things, and we would fight other people from other neighborhoods and stuff like that. Some of it, a lot of it, was racially motivated with, different Spanish gangs and things of that nature. So it was, mid to late 90s was rough. But when it came to Islam, I was trying to get as much information as I could. Um, and I was already adopting some of the morals and things of that nature. So I was already calling myself Muslim. When I was 13, a friend of mine, knew him very well. Played a lot of basketball together. He was actually Christian from Ethiopia, but he was in a refugee camp for a long time in Sudan. Fluent in Arabic, and knew the culture. But I knew he was Christian. I had a few Ethiopian Christian friends. in different buildings in the area. But one day he popped up and he's like, "Yeah, I'm Muslim." He had a kufi on. Yeah. He's like, Muslim, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm Muslim too." And so he asked me, he was like, "Where'd you take your Shahada?" And I knew what it was. I was like, I didn't, but I'm Muslim. He's like, "Oh man, you got to come to the masjid and take the Shahada." So uh, the masjid that he was referring to where he had took Shahada, and we'll probably get into this later, but uh, it was in another neighborhood. And actually, the day that I went to go take Shahada, we had some issues because we got jumped by some gangs on the way. But yeah, I was 13 and I was already calling myself Muslim. So we were on the basketball court one day, and something had came. I was like, "Yeah, I'm Muslim," and I was like, "Oh yeah, alhamdulillah, I'm Muslim too." Like, "Yeah, where'd you take your Shahada?" And I was like, "I didn't." And he's like, "Well, let's go to the masjid to take a Shahada, make it official." And I said, "Okay, I'm with it, fine, whatever." And so we went to it's a Masjid Latif. It was a small
Like musalla type of.
yeah, not too far in the neighborhood, but on the wrong side of the tracks, if you will. And so on the way there, we got approached by a certain group of gangbangers that we had to fight. And actually, they actually made us take off our shirts because they were checking our tattoos. They were checking for tattoos and things like that. I don't have no tattoos. He had no tattoos, but we ran to the masjid. He was like, "We can get some those from the masjid and, get back home or whatever." And so we get chased to the masjid, and I met Imam Khalifa, Allah yarhamu. He was the imam there, very very well known and educated brother from Cleveland, Ohio originally. He's since passed a few years ago, and he had the masjid there, and he was doing a lot of work in the community. And I think a lot of the masjids throughout Chicagoland, they knew him very well, and they followed a lot of what he was doing in terms of helping out brothers and sisters who, were coming from the same type of background, struggling backgrounds, and trying to find that truth that we've been talking about. But yeah, he was doing some awesome work in the community. Took Shahada, and from there, 13, it was quite an experience. Still kind of kept it low key. And slowly, but surely, went into high school. Throughout high school, met more Muslims and got more involved into Islamic rituals and things of that nature. So from there, I mean, that was the journey.
Did that end up becoming like the masjid that you went to, like often, or
No, actually.
was there any
So
masjid
after
near you?
taking Shahada, I just got jumped in the neighborhood. I'm not going back. So after taking Shahada, and it was funny because, I need to mention this because we were talking about, Muslims. And unfortunately for the brother who took me to the masjid, I still know him very well. And he's, but he no longer practices Islam, if you will. I still, I see him every now and again. He's actually a career police officer. But he was going through a lot. Coming from he had a hard background, and knew him very well, and a lot of guide him. But yeah, like so he, um, he took me to the masjid. I knew the brothers, but shortly after, um, the masjid was closed down for a while for some political reasons or whatever, and I didn't get in touch with him for a few years actually. I had first, it had probably been like my senior year in high school. I wanted to go to UMRAH, and I needed it. I don't know if they still do this now, but I needed a certificate of Shahada. You ever heard of this?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if they still do this now, but for me to get the visa at the time, in order for me to do UMRAH, I needed the imam who gave me Shahada to write a letter to the Saudi embassy. So I had to seek him out, and he had moved on, and he went somewhere for a little while, and then he went to the South Side permanently. And after that, so it was a few years before I actually went back to the masjid because dealing with gang issues and stuff like that. So um, with him actually after taking so the day I went to go take the Shahada, he told me that maybe I should. He gave me a couple of books to read. He's like, read this and think about it. Come back next week, and then we could talk about taking Shahada. And I appreciated him for that because now in the microwave society that we live in, people are taking Shahada left and right and being left by the wayside. But I had told him like, I had already been studying. Actually, the book that he gave me, I had already read. So I was like, the information, I'm good, I'm ready. He's like, no, come back next week, check this out. Read this, read that, let me know what you think. And I said, cool, but I've already been thinking about this for some years now, so it's not like I'm just popping in here. And I think, he was a little bit apprehensive because of my friend that I was with. I don't know if he was, what his status was with him, but you can kind of sense when, sometimes you don't know what's in people's hearts, but when people have a track record.
Do you think deep reflection is needed before converting?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I felt that early on, probably even before taking Shahada, like, you started to get into personalities and you understand why people change. And that's what it was about, always with me. And so to follow with something you said a little bit earlier, Malcolm X really represented that. He really represented the the example of a person who can change when they're sincere about wanting to change and having that spiritual fulfillment. And his story resonates with a lot of people if you want to approach it sincerely. But I come across a lot of brothers and sisters, and they do it because it looks cool, or they saw somebody on Instagram, and social media is popping, and they're taking Shahada. I was dealing with a brother uh, who works at a bank that I bank at, right? And he's, I pop in, he's a banker. I talk to him. Yeah, I'm interested in Islam. And I know another banker is Muslim, born from a certain African country. I'm not going to say, but I know that they're close. And so he asked me questions. We've been in discussions where we've all talked, right? And so, he had asked me, during Ramadan, about going to the masjid and, for prayer and stuff like that. And there's a masjid not too far, very, very prominent masjid not too far away from the bank, uh, where they work at. And so, his coworker, took him for Shahada, but kind of, really didn't follow up with him. And I kind of hesitated on it because, I'm not with him every day. And so I wanted to make sure he was in a situation where, he could really have, something to, to hold on to in terms of, resources. So, it's, a lot of times, brothers and sisters, we love to brag about, how many Muslims are converting to Islam, but there's a back door to this thing too. And a lot of people are walking away from the deen as well. We got to be honest about it. And so, this was a few years ago. And so I think this past Eid, the last Eid that we had, I saw the brother and I hit him up and I'm like, yo, Eid Mubarak. And, you know, he was like, what are you supposed to say when somebody says Eid Mubarak? And I said, where's his brother at? And I talked to the brother who he works with, and I'm like, yo, if you take him for Shahada, you really, and this was the difference I had with the friends I had around me. And this is the example of, for example, the Ansar, when they went to, Medina from Mecca, there was a real brotherhood established. And so in Islam, if you understand and if you read the history of Islam, you understand when the Ansar went from Mecca to Medina, the people of Medina brought them into their homes, you know, and literally said to them, half of what I own is yours. You see what I'm saying? There are many examples of that. And so we really don't have that in our society. I'm not going to say, it's it's something that's not understood, I should say, in terms of this, I would call it a fad, if you will. Because, mashallah, we have we have a lot of prominent personalities, if you will, in entertainment and business, social media, that makes this thing look glamorous and look cool to, go take Shahada. And, unfortunately, like I said, there's a back door that people are walking out of.
Have we focused too much on the number of converts rather than the quality of our dawah?
You have massages, you have institutions that are literally doing this. You have, I'm not going to put anybody on blast, but yeah, like that's the thing. We want 1,000 shahadas this Ramadan. What kind of, and what's the purpose behind this goal? I mean, Allahu Alam, but it's like, yeah, that's definitely the wrong approach.
What should we keep in mind when discussing real character growth?
People want to change. People are looking for changes because of all the issues of society. And contrary to popular belief, when society is where it's at now, and you have these different theoretical and philosophical views, and it's so prominent now, especially with just finished this election cycle issue. People are looking for answers. People are looking for change. But like you said, the development of the personality isn't happening. We might want to look into how social media is affecting that. But something somebody said to me early on when I was going through some of the things I was going through as a teenager, 13, 12 years old. Um, you know, he was a street guy, older gentleman, and he had a certain critique of the different gangs that was in our area. And we were outside playing chess one day, and these game bangers, they have a certain mode of recognition when it comes to a handshake, right? They shake. And so he was observing a couple of gang members, and he said to me, he's like, some of these he's like, before you join these gangs, you need to realize that some of them are only living for this shake. And I didn't know what it meant at the time, but later on, after discussing with him, he explained to me that when it comes to change, some people only appreciate the superficial aspects of the change, meaning that the outward modalities, the outward recognition. So in this instance, he was talking about game bangers just shaking up to shake up. And originally, a lot of the street gangs that were developed in Chicago were developed out of, first and foremost, protection of your neighborhoods and providing service to the people in the neighborhoods. So a lot of the food programs, pantry, free lunch programs, a lot of the shelters, a lot of the gangs were developed to basically accommodate, those needs. But, after a while, materialism took over, drugs and violence and, ethnic gangs were developed. And so Chicago, in that sense, is very, very rich in that area. But, he said that to me, and I kind of took that with, everything, because when I accepted Islam, people said, oh, you just joined another gang, right?
Should personal development be prioritized over the feeling of belonging to a group?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Definitely. That's one of the reasons why I took it so, I was kind of quiet about it. It was kind of like a little personal thing to me. Like when I accepted Islam, even, throughout my development and through my process, me becoming Muslim, it wasn't something that I was like always outwardly expressing. I think to a certain extent, those people are kind of weak. Yeah, I mean, not to, saying for those who are like very, you know, um, rambunctious about, their deen. We call it, wearing your religion on your sleeve. Everything is, outwardly expressive I don't have a problem with it, but for me, when especially when it comes to personal development, you really want to uh, internalize, all the lessons that you're studying. And so, even with books, with my experience with other cultures and backgrounds and things of that nature, I just sat back and I observed, what was going on around me, and that kind of like puts you more in tune with, um, you know, uh, understanding the path that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala wants you to take. You see what I'm saying? And I think that was an important, that was an important development piece when the Prophet ﷺ developed the Sahaba and Dar al Akram, when it was, initially a secretive development. Then after a certain period, people went out and this is Islam, this is what we're about. Obviously, we need that, you know. But for me, because I'm coming to something new, you know, I don't need. I remember, saying to some of my friends who were black, "Oh, I'm Muslim." And it's like, man, you can't be Muslim. You're not from Africa. You hanging around with Somalis too much, bro. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just like, all right, whatever. You don't know nothing. You don't know that. You know what I'm saying? You obviously haven't read Malcolm X, and these are older people too, high school. And I'm like, you don't know nothing about Muslims then. Um, but it was something that I took on personally, and I didn't always have to wear it, on my sleeve like others. Now, the brother who took me for Shahada, I kind of saw the change in him probably after 9/11. That's when he, and I don't know if it's because, he was becoming a police officer and stuff. Allahu Alam, we really haven't discussed it. But I remember seeing him after 9/11, and I was walking down the street with a mushaf in my hand. I don't know if I was coming from a masjid or something. And he was like, "You really walking down now? You're really walking down the street with a Qur'ani?" And I'm like, "Yeah. What's the problem?" He's like, "You don't know. You don't see what's going on, man. Put that up." And I'm like, "Dude, what's wrong with you?" You know what I'm saying? And so I remember that was like one of the last conversations that we had about that issue, and this is one of the ones. Came to the basketball court on with a kufi, and I remember, he wouldn't take it off. And 9/11 happens, and I understand it's different for immigrants and refugees and stuff like that, and his profession. I saw a lot of brothers and sisters change after that, but I think at that time for me, it was important for me to say, okay, after 9/11, because I understood. I was actually studying political science at the time in undergrad, and I'm like, okay, this is something different. And I can't hide Islam. Not in this situation. So
That's like it's just
yeah,
that's exactly what they want.
exactly.
It's
So
just more consent for work.
definitely. So yeah. I was like, not for me, not for me.
What is your advice for giving dawah?
I was in the barber shop a couple of weeks ago, and a sister came up to me. She's like, "You Muslim, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she was like, "And I'm interested in the religion." She lives out by Orland Park, so she said that the they put her out the masjid because of the way she was dressed or whatever. But she just went in to get some information, and she's interested in religion, and she's like asking me how she should dress and et cetera, et cetera. So, I referred her, to another sister, but I shouldn't have said the masjid by name. But some of our masajids, our approach, could be a little better when it comes to having someone or a certain entity dealing with new Muslims, because not all of us have that cultural know-how, and how to deal and approach, because I see a lot of people get turned away, and I've seen things happen that I'm like, that's not right. And if I was a new Muslim coming into the masjid and saw this, you know, I wouldn't, I probably wouldn't come back. But you know, I think as long as the Muslim is sincere, and you know, uh, a righteous Muslim recognize that, then the path shall be clear. you know. But again, like we talked about before the break, um, there's a lot of people with hidden agendas. There's a lot of people who want, either it's a spiritual fulfillment is one thing, but the materialistic, fulfillment is another thing. Like, whenever we approach change, we want to know what can that change do for us materialistically, whether it's money or opportunity or access to a group or access to individuals. We want something from it, but you mentioned a couple of things, and it brought me back to how I felt that responsibility on my shoulders, which was another reason why I never really, was wearing it on my sleeve like some other individuals do when they have a change in their lives. Um, you feel a responsibility, you want to take care of that responsibility. So, at least that's how I was raised. That was one of the good things about the way I was raised. Going back to that old man on the block I was playing chess with, you know, it was another thing also, you know, it's okay to change. Um, but if you said that you were something, then you stuck with that. And that was one of the things. That's why my friend Kevin, I remember, the one who said, "You can't be Muslim. You're not African." He was in one of my close circle of friends, and that was one of the things where, especially at our age, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, we're preteens going into teenage years. A lot of us, we didn't have our fathers in our lives. So we were looking for something, and every week it was something new for some of us. Even in the gang life, like we would, one day you're this gang, then the next you're flipping to another gang, then you're another gang.
Alienated people looking for like some identity.
Yeah, yeah,
Something like
exactly.
that. So
You're looking for an identity. Exactly, exactly. You're looking for an identity. But your approach to it, if you're sincere, then you stick with what.
there was like uh, just like there's nothing, you cannot be nobody.
Right.
You'll always be somebody.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
like you have to think about who you're going to be.
Absolutely,
You will be
100%.
somebody regardless.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
already someone.
yeah. But look at that specific demographic of youth coming up,
Yeah.
in the situations they were coming up in impoverished neighborhoods and so forth. One of the most important things that was taught to me was like, you know, you commit to something, then you stick with it. You don't, flip flop. And those, we actually call them disgraceful if they did such things. Yeah, I mean, it's okay to change, but we know when you're just, you're latching onto something, and that's the whole kind of like prison mentality type thing. If you know any brothers who did time in the joint, once you get into that institution, then again, you're going to be looking for an identity, a group to attach yourself to, or whatever the situation may be. But those who are flipping back and forth, no, no, you're just looking for some sort of materialistic benefit. And so for new Muslims, you know, uh, this is a religious identity. This is a complete way of life, which was another thing that was told to me early on. One of the first books I read was Islam, A Complete Way of Life, I think was the title. I forget the author. I wish I had that book, but a brother, he gave it to me early on. And he's like, look, Islam is not, it's not something that you flip flop on. Once you adopt it, then it is complete way of life. And so I accepted that fact, and I carried it as such, you know. And I mean, you know, one of the biggest curses, if you will, is somebody accepting the deen and then retreating on that issue. That's like apostasy is a big issue in Islam. We know that from a Hukum Shari perspective, right? Um, but I mean, I don't know. That would be the main thing with new Muslims coming in.
Explain what's meant by wearing your religion on your sleeve. And what we're talking about is like somebody who's like, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like kind of
Overzealous.
like a superficial,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
portray a superficial adoption.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
Yes.
it's like uh, you've added a label to yourself.
Yes.
Of course, like that's what the issue is. That it's superficial, not that
Yeah.
somebody is displaying these things. Like you were saying,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
after
Yeah.
9/11, then you understood it's like I'm not
Right.
going to bend. I'm not going to like try to water down my identity as Muslim.
Right.
Right? When that was the time so many people were doing that.
Yeah.
Right? At least
Yeah.
from what I hear. I
Yeah.
was
No.
like a kid then, but
Uh-huh.
like that's what the issue is. It's not people like, oh, you should not display because I know people misinterpret things.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for
Yeah.
clarifying that. Yeah, I shouldn't have put it out there like
That's
that.
something like for like I think you said it like you got the idea across, Ryan. Just to
Yeah.
like reiterate, it's the issue is not doing things or that you should keep your religion private or anything
No,
like that. That's
no,
not intended.
no,
It's
no,
like
no, no.
just somebody you have to be
What I'm really saying is, look.
like what I was saying.
No,
I'm
no,
reiterating
no.
the point.
I mean, it doesn't just have to be with Islam. You know, when I've come into different environments, if you will, whether it's a new job, new school setting. I'm not a real social, clubs and the fraternities, all that stuff. I don't get into really, but just I travel a lot, so a new country, if you will. You know, I'm the type of person, when in Rome, do as Romans do, is the saying. But I think that's more or less you don't just adapt to your environment, but you're internalizing it in the sense that you're grasping the full understanding of it. You see what I'm saying? It's kind of hard for me to explain. I'm not saying that you hide it. That's astaghfirullah. That is not what I was trying to get at. And I understand how that could be misconstrued. But for me personally, my background growing up, it could be a new job,
Like you gotta be like authentic.
Yeah, authenticity is a must, but it's something to be said about uh, the approach of internalizing the environment that you're in. I don't know. I used to read a lot of philosophy growing up, and so it's like in the new environment or something like I've been to a couple of different martial arts schools, and so um, you know, um,
Like you take the you mean like you take the kernel of what it is. You take the like the essence of what
yeah,
that is. In
yeah,
this case,
yeah,
Islam,
yeah.
right?
Taking it for what its
And
essence. I love the word
you
essence.
like and you bring it out in the environment that you're in.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Like Islam, it's spread throughout the four corners of the earth.
hmm
Right? We have, alhamdulillah, like millions of people that are following Islam. They have like the same even people that you'll say like most of their ways of understanding the deen are very
hmm
similar,
hmm
and they're like everything like this.
hmm
But you go to you find them in different parts of the world. They're like the way Islam has affected the civilization and the way that people have like adopted it.
hmm
It's obviously still Islam, but there is going to be like little like unique qualities in each place. If you can call it like that. So you need to. Is that what you're trying to say? Like you
Yeah,
need to take this, the essence of this, and apply it, of course, with like all of the legal parts that are there,
yeah,
in the place in your life.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
What should we keep in mind when discussing real character growth?
I'm also a student of human behavior, so I like to examine the outward intricacies of whether it's religious practices or philosophical practices. Um, so in that sense, that's how I really learned. And one of the questions was learning experience, and I think um, you know travel is very important. Travel and understanding different communities, the different backgrounds, different cultures, and things, and that's the best education, in my opinion. You know, so I know you had that question about actual formal education, but I think experiencing different countries and different like you said, Islam is spread through the four corners of the world. So what does that look like? You know, We love to read about it theoretically on paper, you know, but when a Muslim, you know, in China is experiencing what they're experiencing, I can read about it in paper, but if I don't, see and understand the history of Muslims in China, where there are more Muslims in the country of China than there are in Saudi Arabia, but
Is that
yet
true?
that is a fact.
Really?
That is a
Okay.
fact. There are more Muslims in the country of China than there is in the country of Saudi Arabia. When they can go through an ethnic cleansing, just like the Muslims in Gaza, why is it that we can identify with one more than the other? It's because we have distanced ourselves from, you know, uh, the actual, Muslims in China. So, and there's other policies and other things revolved around that. I don't want to open up a can of worms, but, um, you know, as a Muslim who traveled, to that part of the world, I mean, you would know the difference, and you would you wear it differently, I should say.
Yeah.
Not just on the sleeve, but you really understand, what it's about. You really understand as a Muslim how, you know, how privileged you are, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you, a certain light and lens to look at things through. You know what I'm saying? Because, you know, over 1 billion strong, but what does that mean at the end of the day? All these different backgrounds, all these different experiences, you know, where's where's that show of strength uh in the actual numbers of it?
Yeah.
Superficial.
Like our situation today.
Yeah.
What does Islam offer to communities and the world at large?
And everybody has different experiences, different cultures. Some may be easier than others. Yeah, there's some bad blood that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years that you and I will never understand. But Islam can fix it. It might take some time for some places, but in other places it's a little bit more easier because they don't have those same restrictions. They don't have the same history. It's a lot of times it's just a matter of you know of realizing that a change is possible, and I think that's a big barrier that's not talked about often. A lot of people, they don't understand that a change is possible. All they see, all they know is the condition that they're living in the present moment. And so the religion of Islam is uh, so beneficial in the sense that you could analyze your current situation, and then um, you can see the solution and the way out of it. You know what I'm saying? And you talked earlier about the qadr of Allah. That was like one of the biggest things that you know one of the biggest concepts that took me a while, but you know I gravitated towards it early. Understanding fate and destiny, because I said I used to read a lot of different philosoph- philosophical works, if you will, and understanding, you know, the simple fact, it might be simple for some of us, might be a little bit difficult for others, but understand the simple fact that, everything in this life happens for a reason. You gotta understand, what that reason is about. But, through the lens of Islam, everything becomes much more clear. And, that's for me personally, one of the truths about the religion, and one of the reasons why, you know, I'm still here, alhamdulillah, able to stick with it. Other brothers, I mean, there's quite a few, unfortunately, and for some of us, in high school, I remember in high school, some of us was taking Shahada, and then next week it was like, yo, some of us was getting locked up. We did a little time in the joint. Islam or Muslim was a gang, and it was a means of getting through the condition you was in. and the institution that she was in. I know one brother I'm very good friends with still today. But once he got out of jail, he said he didn't want anything that reminded him of prison, and that included Islam. Unfortunately, he gave me all his books, all his prayer rugs, all the tasbih, everything that was in his jail cell. He said he didn't want to. He didn't want to be reminded of anything that reminded him of his jail cell, and he left the religion. But you know,
So, any final thoughts?
everybody, I would say has a different path on this journey. I mean, the goal is the same. The goal, for us as Muslims and as human beings should be uh, Jannah, but with the realization that this life is temporary, right? So understanding that everything in this life, is temporary, and our actions and our deeds, really is a you know it's what puts us over the top at the end of the day, and our ultimate goal. And so through those actions and deeds, we should be clear and sincere in our approach to that journey.
Jazakallah khairan again for our brother Khalil to share his story and his thoughts with us. Jazakumullah khairan for all of you that are watching. And inshallah, we will catch you guys next week. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
لا لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام نحن جيل الهمام نحن فينا عمر لا 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 لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام نحن جيل الهمام نحن فينا عمر صبح بدا نور ظهر نجم وشمس وقمر ألقى على الدنيا الدرر هذا عمر هذا عمر كل البرايا تنتظر أيامه البيض الغرر كي تستفيد من العبر هذا عمر هذا عمر لا لن تدوم الجراح بل سيأتي الصباح نحن أهل الكفاح نحن فينا عمر لا لن تدوم